Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about what happened after the Black Death. And trust me, this isn't your typical history lesson. We're talking about one of the most dramatic changes in human history, when Europe had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Oh, and if you like these stories, please like or subscribe. I'm really interested to know where you're all listening from. So, please leave a comment below with your location and the time there. I'm always amazed by how people all over the world are falling asleep to this. Now, find a comfy place to sit. Take a slow, deep breath and relax. We're going back to 1453. I promise you will really appreciate that mattress once we have finished. So congratulations. You just woke up in England 35 years after the Black Death, which was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The good news is that you survived. The bad news? The world you knew is gone. When you open your eyes, the first thing you notice is that you can't hear anything. There is no hustle and bustle in the village square in the morning. There are no children playing in the streets. There was no hammering from the blacksmith shop. It's just quiet. The quiet that feels strange and heavy in places where there used to be a lot of people. Your muscles ache as you stretch. That tired feeling you get when you've been working harder than your body can handle. But nowadays, everyone who's left works harder than they should. There's no choice. You roll over, feeling the rough straw mattress beneath you. At least you have a mattress now. Before the plague, surfers like you slept on the ground with only a few rags for warmth. But now, well, when half the population dies, suddenly there's a lot more stuff to go around. Isn't it strange how that works? You sit up slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light coming in through the small window. The house itself is bigger than the houses you grew up in. The miller and his family used to own it. All 6 of them died within a week in 1348. Their bodies were buried in the churchyard. They had to dig mass graves because there were so many of them. These days, you try not to think about that too much. The floorboards creak under your feet. The floors are real wood, not just packed dirt. When the plague finished, you inherited more than just a house. There's a chest in the corner with clothes that actually fit. A proper cooking pot hanging over the fireplace. Even a computer cup, which used to be something only rich merchants could afford. It's funny how catastrophes can sometimes make people richer, but not in the way you'd expect. You put on your tunic made of wool instead of the rough hemp you wore before. It feels nice and warm against your skin, but you can't forget that this tunic used to belong to someone who died from choking on their own blood. You try not to think about that either. Outside, you can see little clouds of mist in the morning air. September is usually a cold month in England, but it feels even colder this year. Maybe it's just because there aren't as many people around to make the world a better place. Maybe when you've seen a lot of death, everything seems a bit colder. The village of Little Wickham looks like a mouth with half its teeth knocked out. Houses stand empty, their doors hanging open, gardens wild, and fences falling down. If you look to the distance, you can see fields that should be golden with grain, but instead they're brown and barren. There was nobody left to collect them. Before the plague, this village had about 200 people. Now, maybe 60. On a good day, your stomach makes a loud, sharp noise. That's the thing they don't tell you about surviving disasters. You still get hungry. Life goes on, even when it feels like it shouldn't. You walk towards the middle of the village, past the well where people used to meet and chat. The wooden bucket is hanging there. The rope is in bad condition and there is not much water in it. Maintenance is important, and it's a big part of what we do now. There just aren't enough people to keep things running the way they used to. The baker's shop is still closed. It has been like that for 3 years now. Thomas the baker died with his wife and 2 sons. His apprentice tried to keep things going for a while. But making bread isn't something you can just learn overnight. But the few loaves he made were so dense that they were basically like building materials. These days, people bake their own bread or try to. It seems that a lot of knowledge was lost when the plague struck. All those little skills that people pass down from parent to child. It's gone. It's just gone. You can smell wood smoke drifting from the direction of the manor house, Lord Edmund's place. He survived, but just barely. He lost his wife, his 3 children, and most of his helpers. Now it's just him, his remaining steward, and maybe a dozen servants where they used to be 50. That poor guy actually has to do some of his work now. Can you imagine? But here's where things get interesting. And this is the part that would have been unthinkable before the plague. You're not going to bow and scrape when you see him. You won't be as disobedient as your father was, because Lord Edmund needs you more than you need him. If half the population dies suddenly, the remaining people will be very valuable. This is because there will be a big change in supply and demand, like in the Middle Ages. You walk across the frosty grass towards the manor. Today is the day you're going to ask for more money. 3 months ago, people would have been very angry with you for even thinking that. But 3 months ago, Lord Edmund had other choices. He doesn't anymore. The manor house is in front of us. Stone walls that used to seem so big. Now they just look like expensive walls around an increasingly empty house. Most of the windows have shutters. It's not worth heating rooms that no one uses. You rap the heavy wooden door. 3 loud knocks that echo in the quiet morning. I can hear footsteps coming up behind me. They're coming up slowly and quietly. The steward opens the door. Richard, a man who used to have 3 assistants. Now he does everything himself. "Morning, Thomas," he says. His voice sounds tired, like a lot of people's voices do these days. People are finding it hard to do everything they want to do because they don't have enough time or money. "Good morning, Richard. I need to speak with his lordship." Richard raises an eyebrow. Before the plague, the peasants didn't just demand to meet the lords. But these are not from before the plague times. He's in the solar. I'll tell him you're here. You wait in the big hall, and even here you can see how much has changed. The tapestries are covered in dust. There's nobody left to look after them properly. The long tables where lots of people used to eat, most of them sat close together and covered with cloth. Lord Edmund appears at the top of the stairs. He's smaller than you remember, and he's thinner too. The plague didn't kill him, but it made him look 20 years older. His clothes are fine, but they hang loosely on his frame. Even rich people don't eat as well as they used to. "Thomas," he says, coming down the stairs with careful dignity. "Richard says you wanted to speak with me. I'm your servant, my lord, about my pay." The words hang in the air between you. A year ago, or even 6 months ago, you would have been punished for saying this. But Lord Edmund, you just talk like someone who has had this conversation many times. "What are you making now?" 2 shillings a week. I've spoken to John in Great Wickham, and he's getting 3 shillings for the same work. They're also giving him an extra measure of grain. Lord Edmund's jaw tightens. John has always been like this. He stops himself and takes a breath. "What exactly are you asking for?" "I want 3 shillings, and I want Sundays off. I want to have the whole day off, not just the morning." The old Lord Edmund would have been furious. The guards had beaten you up, but the old Lord Edmund had 50 workers to choose from. Lord Edmund has you and maybe 5 other people. He looks out of the window at his fields, brown stubble where golden grain should be waving. The fields need to be plowed ready for the winter wheat. There is work to be done, but not enough people to do it. At last, he says, it's 2 shillings and 6 pence, and he'll be getting paid for Sunday too. You pretend to consider this, but honestly, it's more than you hoped for. However, you've learned something important in these past few years. When someone needs you more than you need them, you have power. You say, "Done," and extend your hand. He shakes hands with the peasant, just like a lord would. Your grandfather would have been very shocked. As you walk back through the village, you pass the churchyard. The original cemetery was full by the time the plague finished, so they dug new sections. Then those were filled up. Now there are graves all around the church, like fallen leaves. But life carries on. You see Margaret hanging laundry behind her cottage. She's wearing a dress that's too fancy for a widow. But her husband had been the village's most successful businessman before he died. Now she owns his business, or at least part of it. Women were starting to own property and run their own shops. Another thing that would have been impossible before. It's strange how a disaster can create opportunities. She waves at you and you wave back. Maybe later, when the work's finished, you'll stop by, share some posts, talk about how things used to be, and maybe if you're both in the right mood, you'll talk about how things might be. That's the thing nobody tells you about surviving disasters. After a while, you start thinking about the future again. Your stomach makes a noise again, reminding you that to survive you still need the basics: food, shelter, and work. But as you head towards your own fields, the ones you're renting now that you can afford it, you're thinking about more than just getting by. You're trying to get ahead. The walk to your fields goes past the old grain mill. The wheel is still turning, but very slowly. There's not enough grain to keep it busy. Before the plague, this mill worked from sunrise to sunset during harvest season. No, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. But that's changing too slowly because the survivors are eating better, working less, and demanding more. When people have more money, they buy more grain, meat, and other things. It's like watching a broken machine slowly start to work again, but in a different and better way. Your fields stretch out before you. Not huge, but it's yours. Well, I rented it, but at terms that your father would never have imagined. Lord Edmund really needed someone to work his land, so he agreed to give you 60% of what you grow. Before the plague, a peasant might keep 20% if he was lucky. The soil is dark and rich, and it's ready for winter planting. You run your fingers over it, feeling its potential. This land could feed a family and still have enough left over to sell at market. Or maybe even enough to buy that piece of property down by the river that's been empty since the Hartwell family died. Here's something nobody saw coming. When the plague finished killing people, there was a lot of land and not many workers. This meant that for the first time in a very long time, normal people had choices. You spend the morning digging a hole for winter wheat. The wooden plow makes neat furrows in the earth. It's good work, and it's also chosen work. You're here because you want to be, not because someone told you to be. That makes all the difference. At about midday, you stop to get some bread and ale. The bread is your own creation, made from grain that you grew yourself. It's dense. It's a little burned on one side, but it's yours, and that makes it taste better than any bread a baker has ever made. As you eat, you can see smoke rising from chimneys around the village. There are fewer chimneys than before, but the ones that are lit burn brighter. People heat their homes better now, eat more hearty meals, and wear warmer clothes. The plague took everything, but it also left everything for the people who survived. You finish your meal and get back to work. The afternoon sun is warm on your shoulders as you use the plow to turn more earth. In the distance, you can hear Margaret's children playing. There's some of the few children left in the village, and their laughter can be heard over the less noisy background now that there are fewer other sounds competing with it. It's a sad sound, but not completely sad. Those children are growing up in a world where a peasant can negotiate with a lord, where a widow can run a business, and where someone born in a one-room hovel can end up farming their own fields. That's worth something, right? When the sun starts to go down, you clean your tools and head home. You now live in a house that is bigger than the house you grew up in. We have a meal that your parents never ate. A life that has been born from tragedy is undoubtedly better than the life that came before it. Tomorrow, you'll plant more wheat. Next week, you'll probably have another conversation with Lord Edmund about pay or how the workplace is run. Next month, you might decide to buy that property by the river because the world ended and then it began again. It is different. It is smaller in some ways, but bigger in others. As you get into bed and pull your warm woolly blankets up to your chin, you think about your children, the ones you might have one day. They'll grow up in a world where people like you, who work hard for their money, can actually have a say in how things go. That's not nothing. That's all there is to it. Your eyes feel heavy as the village becomes calm in the evening. There aren't as many people singing as there used to be, but somehow, the ones that remain are more important. The Black Death took everything, but what it left behind was the chance to do something new. News travels quickly in small villages, especially when it's bad news for the people in charge. By autumn, 3 other ordinary people in Little Wickham had asked for and received higher wages. Margaret's hired 2 of her neighbors to help with the business. She pays them wages that would have seemed impossible just a few years back. But here's where things get complicated. The King Edward's court in London has been hearing stories. Stories about ordinary people becoming discontented. Stories about lords paying very high wages. Stories about the natural order of things getting turned upside down. The king is not happy. You hear about it first from a traveling tinker who stops by the village in late October. His cart is full of pots and pans, but more importantly, he's full of news from around the world. He tells you about a new law that Parliament has passed while you look at copper pot. The law says that workers can't ask for more than they were paid in 1346 when many people were dying. You put the pot down and your stomach feels cold. What does that mean? The tinker looks around, making sure no one is listening. If they catch you asking for more money, they can put you in chains and mark your face. Some places are putting people on the rope. The copper pot suddenly feels very heavy in your hands. The tinker keeps talking quietly. There's a difference between having laws and enforcing them. It's hard to punish a man when you need him to collect your grain. That night, you lie awake listening to the wind rattle your shutters. The house feels less safe now, less like a home and more like something you would aim at. That's what progress is all about. It always makes someone angry. The next morning, there's frost and bad news. Lord Edmund's servant arrives at your door before sunrise, looking as unhappy as the ground in winter. His lordship wants to see you now. The walk to the manor feels different this time. It feels longer and more ominous. The stones under your feet seem to whisper warnings, and your breath comes out in these sharp puffs that disappear too quickly in the cold air. Lord Edmunds is waiting in the big hall, but he's not the only one. 2 men stand beside him. They are wearing the king's colors, and they have swords hanging down at their sides. The new law will be checked by special officials. Thomas, Lord Edmund, says that he's trying to be neutral when he speaks. I'm afraid we need to discuss our arrangement again. One of the people on the commission stands up. He's young, maybe 25, and he has very soft hands. King Edward has ordered that wages must be the same as they were in 1346, 2 shillings per week, no more. Your heart beats quickly, but you speak calmly. If I say no, the commissioner will reach for his sword. Then you'll have to explain why you won't to the king's justice. We have stock set up in the village square and brands heating in the forge. You look at Lord Edmund, searching his face for some sign of support. But he won't look you in the eye. Whatever power you thought you had, it's gone. It was just like that. I understand, you say finally. What else can you say? But as you walk back through the village, you notice something. The other peasants are gathered around the well. The voices are quiet, but you can tell they are serious. Margaret is there too, along with several farmers from the villages nearby. News spreads quickly, but people can also spread resistance quickly. They can't just take it back. Someone's saying, we're the ones doing the work. We're the ones they need. Another voice joins in, whether there's a king or not. People who have died cannot plant grain. You join the circle, and you can feel the tension in the air, like lightning about to strike. These are people who have experienced freedom and do not want to lose it. What are you thinking? You ask. Margaret speaks up, her voice sounding different to you. We think it might be time for the king to find out who really runs this country. That afternoon, you're working in your fields when you see smoke. There are 3 columns of it rising from the direction of Great Wickham. and then more from Little Thornton and Wickfield. By evening, the sky is filled with orange lights against the darkening sky. These include granaries, tax records, and the outbuildings of manor houses. These are not dangerous, but they can send a message. The revolution has begun. It starts small like most revolutions do. A tax collector here, a royal commissioner there, finding themselves suddenly unwelcome in villages where they used to be respected. Sometimes it's just cold shoulders and empty houses. Sometimes it's stones that are thrown from behind hedges, but by winter it's spreading. You hear stories from traveling merchants, but only if they are brave enough to travel. Farmers in Kent are marching towards the king's castles. Farmers in Essex are refusing to collect grain for lords who won't pay them enough money. Entire villages in Yorkshire are simply disappearing. People are leaving everything they own behind and moving to places where they can get better treatment. And the amazing thing is, the lords can't stop them. Stopping a few troublemakers is one thing. Stopping half your remaining workforce is a really bad idea. Lord Edmund tries to threaten her first, then tries to negotiate, and then he tries to beg. Look, he says during another awkward meeting in the Great Hall. The commissioners said 2 shillings, but what if we called it 2 shillings plus other costs, food allowances, and extra grain rations? You act like you're thinking about it, but really you're just enjoying watching a lord struggle. What kind of food allowances? I eat meat twice a week, eat good bread, drink ale with dinner, and have a place to live. You can stay in your current home without paying rent. It's not everything you had before, but it's something. And more importantly, it shows that laws are just words on paper when reality doesn't match them. You shake his hand again, and this time his grip is desperate. Winter covers the village like a thick blanket, but it's a quiet that feels restless. Letters are arriving at the manor more and more often. They're being brought by nervous messengers who don't stay very long. Reports from other parts of the kingdom, mostly bad news for anyone wearing a crown. The problem is, when you kill half the population, you don't just lose workers, you lose the social structure that held everything together, the unquestioned authority, the long-standing assumptions about who belongs where. And once people start questioning those assumptions, it's hard to get them to stop. Spring brings news of larger uprisings. It wasn't just local arguments about pay, but planned rebellions with leaders, demands, and real armies. Rural people who have decided they no longer want to live as rural people. Everyone's talking about Tyler. He's a man from Kent who's angry with the king and his officials. He's so angry that he'd like to see them both go to hell. Margaret tells you that he has 10,000 men. They were all armed and angry. You hammer another nail into the thatch, thinking about how different everything feels now. Before the plague, it would have been impossible to get 10,000 angry peasants together. There wouldn't have been enough dissatisfaction, confidence, or organizational skills. But after the plague, you realize that the impossible happens all the time. What does he want? We want fair pay, an end to corruption, and officials being paid to do the wrong thing. She stops for a moment, then quietly adds something else. This seems fair to me. By the start of summer, the story of the rebellion is no longer just something you hear from travelers. It's something you can see in the distance. There is smoke from burning tax offices, and lots of people are running away from areas where the royal armies and local militias are fighting. Then, one morning in June, you wake up to find armed men in your village square. They were not royal soldiers, but they were not ordinary people either. And not ordinary people living nearby. Something in between. Men with weathered faces and hardened hands, but carrying proper weapons and wearing bits of armor that look like they've been taken from somewhere else. Their leader is a woman, which is surprising, but she acts like she's in charge. And when she speaks, people listen. We're going to London, she tells the crowd. We want to present our demands to the king. Anyone who wants to come is welcome. We're the demands. Someone calls out. She takes out a piece of parchment, but you think she has memorized every word. Serf and villeinage are now here. All workers should be paid fairly. The taxes on Poles will be removed. We must punish corrupt officials who have become rich while honest people go hungry. The crowd quietly discuss the possible dangers. Joining a rebellion is serious. People get killed for rebelling. But then again, people have been killed just for asking for fair wages. What makes you think the king will listen? Lord Edmund has arrived, accompanied by his remaining guards, but his voice does not have the same authority as it used to. He sounds worried. The woman looks at him with something that might be pity. Your lordship, with respect. The king doesn't have much choice. Half of his tax collectors are dead or have left. His armies are very busy fighting uprisings from here to Scotland. Winter is coming. If he wants grain to be harvested and bread to be baked and roads to be maintained, he needs us more than we need him. She's right, and everyone knows it. That evening, as the rebels set up camp in the common pasture, you find yourself thinking about the life you've built since the plague and whether it's worth risking for a better life. Margaret has already decided to sell her business to a cousin, packed everything she owns into a wagon, and volunteered to help organize supplies for the march to London. Are you coming? She asks as you help load her belongings. You look around the village, at the house you've always lived in, at the fields you've always worked on, at the life you've slowly built up from the old world's ruins. It's a good life, better than anything your parents could have imagined. But it's also a life that depends on other people. These people might take it away at any moment if they thought they could. Yes, you say, finally, I'm coming. This is what you have learned since the plague. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about creating something that makes life worth living. The next morning, you lock your door. Leave a note for Lord Edmund, explaining that you've gone to discuss working conditions with the king and join the line of people heading south towards London. The roads are full of people like you. Farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and laborers. All of them are united by the simple belief that they deserve better than what they're getting. Some carry weapons, others just carry tools, but all of them carry something that would have been impossible before the plague. Hope. The landscape you pass through tells the story of the last 5 years, with burned fields and empty villages and manor houses with boarded windows. But it also tells another story. You can see this in new construction, improved roads, and signs of careful, purposeful rebuilding. That's the thing about catastrophes. They get rid of the old to make way for the new. As you walk, you can chat with the other people traveling with you. A blacksmith from Essex whose boss tried to cut his wages in half. A miller from Suffolk whose grain stores were taken by the king's tax collectors. A weaver from Norfolk whose whole village was burned down because they refused to pay a tax on poles that they couldn't afford. All of them have stories. All of them have complaints. They all realize that we can't rely on our own strength to get through this. By the third day, your group will have grown to almost 1,000 people. By the fifth day, there were rumors of other groups coming to London from all directions. Lots of people are all going to the same place, and they all want the same things. The king will have to listen, whether he wants to or not. You camp on a hill that night, looking out over the Thames. In the distance, you can see the smoke and lights of London, the biggest city in England. Tomorrow, we will see the most important conversation in the kingdom's history. As you get comfortable in your bedroll, listening to the sound of people talking around the campfire, you think about how far you've come. Not just in miles, but in everything else. 5 years ago, you were a serf who couldn't leave your lord's land without permission. Tonight, you are a free man camping outside the capital, ready to negotiate with the king as an equal. That's valuable, even if tomorrow goes wrong. The stars in the sky are the same ones that shone down during the plague years, when bodies filled the streets and the future seemed impossible. But somehow, the future arrived anyway, and it looks nothing like anyone expected. London is a very exciting city. You can smell it before you can see the city walls. Thousands of people packed together, cooking, fires waste, horses, and underneath it all, something else. Something that makes your stomach tighten with memory and fear. You will reach the end of the final hill on June 13th. And there it is, the greatest city in England, spread out below you like a sprawling beast. There are stone walls, church spires, and a tower that is as tall as a giant's fist. And all around it, there are camps. There are thousands of people in the same situation as you. Farmers, craftspeople, and workers who have walked hundreds of miles to talk to a king. Jesus breathes the blacksmith walking beside you. Look at them all. The camps go on for miles along the river. Banners flutter in the morning breeze, most of them homemade, with symbols you recognize from your own village. The cross of St. George, tools of different jobs, and here and there, more sinister signs, nooses, headless crowns, slogans painted on rough cloth, death to traitors. When Adam delved and Eve span, who was the gentleman then? Your group finds space on a hillside called Black Heath, where the Kent rebels have gathered under their leader. Tyler is smaller than you expected, maybe about 40 years old, with a face that shows he has worked hard and made difficult choices in life. But when he talks about them all, listen, brothers, he says, his voice carrying across the camp without strain. Tomorrow, we enter the city not as conquerors, but as free men seeking justice from our king. The crowd cheers, but Tyler raises his hand to stop them. Remember, we're not here to destroy. We want to build a better system and get rid of the old corrupt one. You nod along, feeling hopeful and excited. People around you look happy, like they do in English villages. You might not sleep much that night. Everyone at the camp is excited. People share food, stories, and dreams of the future. A miller from Canterbury talks about starting a cooperative where workers share the profits. A weaver from Dover imagines guilds run by craftsmen instead of wealthy merchants. But there's also tension because everyone knows that what happens in the next few days will determine whether this ends in triumph or massacre. Dawn breaks gray and misty over the mountains, and with it comes movement. Thousands of people are leaving their campsites, collecting their things, and moving together in large groups that stretch as far as you can see. The march to London starts. You walk with Margaret and the blacksmith. He was one of many people heading toward the city gates. The guards at Old Gate see the crowd coming and just move to the side. Smart men. London streets are narrow and twisty, designed for a few hundred people at most, not thousands. The crowd spreads out evenly, filling every space, and the city responds. Some people in London close their shutters and bar their doors. Others lean out of windows, cheering and throwing bread and coins. Some people did join the march, but not many. People who do skilled jobs and laborers are angry with the rich merchants who run the city. But it's when you reach the wealthy quarter that things get interesting. The houses here are different. They are larger and made of stone, not wood. They have courtyards and gardens, and they show that their owners lived in comfort while others did not. Someone throws a stone. You're not sure who, but suddenly there are lots of them in the air. Windows break. The doors splinter, and the crowd tastes blood. The Seaview Palace is where it all begins. John of Gaunt's house, the second most impressive building in London, after the royal palaces, is where the man who's really in charge lives. As young King Richard grows up, someone shouts, "Burn it!" And suddenly, everyone's shouting it. You find yourself going with the crowd through the palace gates into courtyards filled with treasures that represent more wealth than your entire village sees in a decade. Tapestries, gold-plated furniture, and exotic wood furniture were all bought with money taken from people who work for a living. The palace is on fire, and it looks really beautiful. You are standing in the courtyard, watching flames lick at the windows. You can feel the heat on your face. You are thinking about justice, about balance, and about how sometimes the only way to build something new is to burn down what came before. Margaret appears beside you, her face lit by the orange glow. "Do you feel good?" she asks. "Yes," you admit it. It does. But even as the palace burns, Tyler's trying to keep things under control. You see him moving through the crowd, reminding people that they're here for justice, not revenge. Destroying property is bad, but harming people is worse. Most people listen to him. The prison fleet is opened and lots of prisoners are suddenly set free. Some of them are people who owe money and have been sent to prison for this reason. Others have been imprisoned for more serious crimes. Temple Bar is next. It is a building where all the legal records are stored. Laws, traditions, and property records were all destroyed in a short period of time. This is what the lawyers and lawmakers never understood. When the law only helps rich people, it starts to feel like justice is being served. As evening falls, you find yourself with a group of rebels surrounding the Tower of London, the old castle where kings lived and died, in places where traitors have been killed and the royal government continues to function, regardless of who suffers as a result. And inside, shaking behind stone walls that suddenly don't seem so strong, is 14-year-old King Richard himself. "Come out," someone shouts. "Come out and face your people." But the tower is silent, its gates locked and its guards invisible. Tyler arrives with a message. The king has agreed to meet with intermediaries tomorrow morning at Mile End, which is outside the city walls, a place where both sides can gather safely. He has agreed to listen to what we want. Tyler announces all of them: freedom from being controlled by the serf, fair pay, and punishment for officials who are dishonest. The crowd cheers, but you notice that Tyler's face looks careful and hopeful, but also cautious, because saying you will listen and actually listening are two very different things. That night, you sleep in the ruins of a tax collector's office, the old records that kept track of how much every peasant in 3 counties owed. They're great for making kindling for your campfire. There are fires burning in a dozen places outside London. Not the whole city, but enough to send a clear message that can be seen for miles. The old order is ending. What happens next? That's the question for tomorrow. It's morning and you hear the sound of trumpets. The sound of trumpets can be heard coming from Mile End. King Richard is ready to talk. The process of leaving the city is not the same as the process of entering it. It is more organized and more purposeful. Tyler managed to get the crowd to sort themselves out into columns with people from different regions. You walk with the 2,000-strong Essex group, carrying banners that list your specific complaints: the end of unfair taxes, fair courts, the right to hunt in royal forests, simple things, really human things. Mile End is a large open space just outside the city walls of London, and it's exactly the kind of place where a huge gathering like this one is going to happen. On a raised platform surrounded by guards and nobles is the king himself, Richard Plantagenet, age 14. He is the heir to Edward the Black Prince and ruler of England. Though right now he looks more like a scared boy trying very hard to appear brave, which, to be fair, he probably is. The meeting starts with a ceremony where announcements are made and nobles give speeches about the king's mercy and his power to rule. But Tyler speaks directly, which makes lawyers nervous. "Your Majesty," he says, stepping forward, "we come to talk about how your people, all your people, can live with dignity." Richard's voice is higher than you expected, and it's still changing, but you can still hear it clearly across the field. "We are ready to listen to your concerns." What follows is the most extraordinary conversation in English history. A king talking with ordinary people as if they were his equals. Tyler presents the demands one by one: the end of the serf and the village, freedom for all enslaved people, rent should be reduced to a reasonable level, All rebels should be forgiven. These rights will always be protected by charters. Richard is young and scared, but he seems to have good advice. He agrees to everything, every single demand. The crowd cheers. People cry, hug each other, and kneel down to say thank you. You're shaking and feel very overwhelmed by the size of what has just happened. Serfdom ended just like that, with a document written on special paper and the king's official stamp. The scribes start copying the document right away. These documents will be taken back to every village and town. This shows that the old system is no longer working and something new has started. You're given a charter. The parchment is still wet with ink, and it has the royal seal that makes it law. The word freedom, written in Latin and English. As the sun comes up, Margaret is crying, and you realize you're crying too. But even as the celebration begins, you notice something. Tyler is not celebrating. He's watching the king and the nobles around him. He knows that promises made under pressure can easily be broken once the pressure's gone. He should be careful because while this meeting is happening, while the agenda is being set and hands are being shaken, other things are happening too. A group of rebels, unhappy with how slowly things are moving, have decided to do something about it. They've attacked the Tower of London, beating the guards and searching for the men they hold responsible for years of unfair treatment. Simon Sudbury was the Archbishop of Canterbury and Chancellor of England. He was the man who blessed the poll taxes and defended the old system. Robert Hales was the Treasurer of England. He collected taxes and made money for the king's coffers while poor people starved. John Ledger was the bureaucrat who designed the whole system of oppression. They find all three, drag them from their hiding places, and kill them on Tower Hill. The news reaches Mile, and just as the charter ceremony is ending, the messenger is struggling to speak because they are so excited. The towers have been captured. The traitors are dead. Sudbury's heads are on a spike. The celebration becomes more intense and urgent. This changes everything. There's no going back now. This was not just a peaceful protest. This is a complete and bloody revolution. Richard's face goes white, but he doesn't run away. Instead, he has asked for another meeting to be held tomorrow at Smithfield to discuss other concerns. Tyler agrees, but you can see he's thinking hard. He knows the game has changed. He knows that when he's dealing with royal officials, it's a whole other kind of negotiation. That night, they camp again outside London, and everyone feels strange, happy, and scared at the same time because they all know they've done something wrong. There's no way to solve this without fighting. The rebellion will either be a complete success or a total failure. There is no in between. You lie awake, listening to the sound of people talking around the camp and thinking about the map you have with you. Freedom written in fancy ink on fancy paper, but also thinking about the heads on pikes of the tower and what they mean for anyone who's helped put them there. Tomorrow's meeting at Smithfield will decide if you go home as free men or if you die as traitors. To be honest, you're not sure which is more likely. The same stars that shone over your village when this all started with a simple request for fair wages are still there. But somehow, this simple request has become much bigger. It's like the whole country of England is being asked to change or be destroyed. Either way, things will never be the same again. The old world died out with the plague, and tomorrow you'll find out whether the new world gets to live. Smithfield feels different. Where my end had been open, welcoming, a place where equals could meet and talk. Smithfield feels like a trap. It's smaller and more closed off, with too many places for armed men to hide. You notice these things now. After a week of revolution, your eyes have learned to spot threats, work out how far away exits are, and tell the difference between a nervous guard and a dangerous one. The king arrives with a lot more soldiers. They walk around the field in neat groups, supposedly to protect themselves, but it seems like they're actually there for a different reason. Richard looks different, too. He doesn't look like a scared boy. It's more like someone who spent the night getting advice from people who know how to deal with difficult people. What? Tyler takes a step forward, and you can see that he is feeling tense. He knows this meeting won't be like yesterday's, but he's committed now. He can't back out, not now that he's gotten this far. Your Majesty, Tyler starts to say, we've come to discuss more terms, but Richard stops him. The terms discussed yesterday are enough. We suggest you go back to your homes and stop bothering us. The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Yesterday's promises are now up for discussion. Tyler's voice becomes more serious. Your Majesty, those terms didn't cover everything. We need real guarantees, and we need them in writing with penalties for anyone who tries to cancel them. Richard's voice has a new edge. Tyler, you're not thinking straight. We are your king. You don't make demands of us. The crowd behind you becomes restless, sensing the change in mood. Yesterday, they were normal people asking their ruler for things. Today, the rebels will be judged. Tyler takes another step forward. You can see the sweat on his face, even though it's a cool morning. Your Majesty, we're reasonable men. We've fought for what's right. We're not going to leave here without something. Blood. Richard's voice gets louder. You speak of blood. You killed our chancellor, our treasurer, men who worked hard for the king. Tyler says that he served himself, but there were honest people who starved. The space between them feels tense. Two men, each with a different idea about how the world should work. And thousands of people are waiting to see which idea wins around them. That's when it happens. Tyler is annoyed by the king's coldness. He makes a gesture as a result. Maybe he's reaching for his sword. Maybe he's just making a point. Maybe he's trying to show something. It doesn't matter. William Woolworth, the Lord Mayor of London, sees Tyler take his weapon out and decides he's seen enough. He pulls out his sword very quickly and hits Tyler in the neck before anyone can react. Tyler staggers, blood spraying, his eyes wide with shock. He takes two more steps, reaches out towards the king as if to say something, and collapses dead. It is silent for about 3 heartbeats. This is long enough for everyone to understand what just happened. Then chaos. The crowd surges forward, screaming for revenge. Swords are pulled out and bows are ready. Tyler's strict rules have been broken in an instant. And then Richard does something amazing. He spurred his horse forward directly into the mob, his young voice cutting through the screaming. You'll have no captain but me. The words are chosen and timed perfectly because these people are not anarchists or criminals. They're people who still believe in kingship, who still think their problems can be solved by asking the king to help them. And here's their king, young and brave and apparently nice, offering to be their leader. Amazingly, the crowd actually stops. Follow me, Richard says, his voice getting louder. I will be your king and your captain. We will listen to your complaints. Justice will be done. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Instead of facing an angry mob seeking revenge for their murdered leader, he has created a situation where he is leading that mob, and their anger becomes his to direct. The crowd follows him away from Smithfield, away from Tyler's body, to a field where they can be properly surrounded by royal troops. And once they're there, once they're separated and outnumbered, Richard's true intentions become clear. He speaks with total authority, telling the men of Essex, Kent, and Suffolk, you have been tricked by traitors and rebels. But we are kind. Go back to your homes now, and we will forgive you for being confused. The crowd is quiet and seems unsure. Some of the rebels are showing that they agree and are ready to accept the offer. Others look suspicious, as if they can sense the trap. What about the charters? Someone calls out, what about our freedom? Richard's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Those agreements were made under pressure. If you sign a contract while feeling pressured, it's not legally valid. And there it is. The betrayal is complete and final. You feel a shiver run down your spine as you fully understand what is going on. There is no possibility of going home as free men. There's no peaceful solution. What happens next is the important thing. Some of the rebels run away, straight away, heading for the corners of the field. Others try to stay together to try and save something from the wreckage. But the royal troops are already moving, surrounding groups of rebels, separating leaders from followers, and beginning the process of turning a political uprising into a criminal conspiracy. You grab Margaret's hand. We need to go now. What about the others? The others are finished. We're staying. We're done too. You move away during the confusion, go to the edge of the field where the circle of people isn't quite finished yet. You can hear shouting and the sound of weapons being used behind you. It's a revolution, but it's dying. The journey home takes 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, they traveled at night and hid during the day. They avoided main roads where royal patrols might be hunting rebels. The countryside shows the effects of the crackdown. Smoke is coming from villages that support the rebellion. There are bodies hanging from trees along major roads. Farmhouses belonging to families whose men went to London to fight in the war were burned down. King Richard is very good at holding grudges. You arrive in Little Wickham on a gray morning in early July and find the village has been transformed. Royal commissioners have been asking questions, taking names, and making lists. Lord Edmund greets you at the Manor House, but not with relief, with cold calculation. Thomas looks at you like he's judging you. I hear you've been traveling. I'm just visiting family, my lord. Is it family in London? You know where you've been, and so does everyone else. That's why the question hangs in the air between you. Everyone knows what you did. The only question is whether Lord Edmund will do anything about it. He says he's been asked to give names of men from this village who might have taken part in the recent disturbances. You feel like your mouth is dry. I've told them that my workers were here the whole time, helping with the harvest. They were so busy that they didn't have time to go to London. You feel relieved, but there is a cost. Lord Edmund also says people who work hard should be paid properly. I think £18 per week is a good amount. No more requests for pay rises. There will be no more negotiations. Take it or explain to the king's justice why you weren't in the village during the recent trouble. You were making 18 fewer items than before the rebellion. You negotiated a lower price after the plague, but this is still more than what you'd get if you were executed for treason. You think 18p is fair because you have no other choice. The next few months are quiet. It's very quiet. It's the quiet that happens when people are scared to speak up, scared to make a noise, or scared to do anything that might attract the wrong kind of attention. The leaders of the rebellion are hunted down one by one. Some of them are killed in public. Their heads are put on spikes to scare other people. Others just disappear, and we have to use our imagination to think about what might have happened to them. The promises made at Mile End were forgotten. The charters that promised freedom are now invalid. The end of serf, and it has been put off for a while. At first, it looks like the rebellion didn't happen, but things have changed in ways that can't be reversed. That's the thing about revolutions, even the ones that don't succeed. They change how people think about themselves, where they fit in, and what they can do. You work Lord Edmund's fields, but you don't work them the same way. It seems grumpy now, like it's angry. You do what you're told, but that's it. And when opportunities arise to cause small problems, equipment that breaks at inconvenient times, grain that somehow gets spilled, work that takes longer than it should, well, accidents happen. Other villages have had similar accidents. People are working less in the kingdom. It's not a big change, but it's noticeable and important. And the royal treasury, despite the crackdown, continues to struggle because dead peasants don't pay taxes, workers who have fled don't harvest grain, and laborers who are sulky and full of resentment don't work as hard as those who are motivated. Winter brings news from London. Parliament tried to collect poll taxes, but failed. It's too expensive to enforce and too dangerous to pursue. The rebellion failed, but its central demand the thing that started all the trouble, has quietly been met. Little wins. By spring, small changes are spreading through the kingdom. The lords are offering better conditions to stop workers from leaving. The church is talking less about obeying rules and more about being fair. Merchants are hiring workers at wages that would have been unthinkable just a few years back. This wasn't because people had changed their minds about what was right and wrong, but because the world just didn't work the same way after the plague and the rebellion. Margaret is doing well. She's opened a new shop in the next village, selling things to travelers. Business is going well, partly because she's smart and partly because she's one of the few people left with enough money to take advantage of opportunities. One evening, as you sit by her fireplace sharing a beer, she says, "Funny how things work out. We fought and died, but in the end, we got most of what we wanted. Did we? Look around you. You're paying less rent than before the rebellion. I'm the boss of my own business. The poll tax is no longer in place. Lords are competing for workers instead of the other way around." She's right. The rebellion failed. But the world it was fighting for arrived anyway, slowly and quietly, through lots of small changes and compromises. This is how real change usually happens. It will not be through big actions or sudden confrontations, but through the ongoing, constant pressure of people who will not accept things that should not be accepted. You think about what Tyler, sometimes lying in the dirt at Smithfield, with blood collecting around his head. He died for nothing and everything. We don't know what caused it, but the main reason, the thing he was really fighting for, survived. Freedom isn't just a word on paper. It's a way of thinking. It means not accepting that some people matter more than others just because of where they were born. Once that idea is out there in the world, it's really hard to make it go away again. Look outside Margaret's window. You can see lights in the houses across the village. People living their lives, making their choices, building their futures, not as serfs or bondmen, but as free people who just happen to be poor. That's not nothing. That's all there is to it. The plague killed half of Europe's population. The rebellion that followed killed hundreds more people. But what came out of all that death and destruction? Something completely new. A society where ordinary people had choices. This is about people who were born in a Havel and who end up owning land. A widow could run a business there. In the past, ordinary people were able to tell their bosses no and still be safe. It wasn't the world Tyler dreamed of, but it was closer to that dream than anyone thought possible. Back when things were really bad and it looked like things would never get better. Change happened slowly, then all at once. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to experience the moment when everything changes, when the old ideas are no longer valid, and when new opportunities suddenly seem possible. The Black Death was the worst thing that ever happened to medieval Europe. But what came after that, and grew from the soil, made stronger by all that death, was the start of the modern world. We want a world where people like you are important, where your opinion matters, and where the future belongs to everyone, not just those born into wealth. Remember this when you go to sleep in your home. You will earn money that you help to negotiate in a village where you can stay or leave as you please. The revolution failed, but you still won. Time can make you forget things you thought you'd never get over. It's been 15 years since the rebellion. It's been 15 years since Tyler died in the dirt at Smithfield. It's been 15 years since you walked home from London with a price on your head and a revolution in your heart. Now you're 43 years old. You fully own your house. Your fields produce enough grain to feed your family and sell at market. Your oldest son is learning to read. This would have been impossible for someone like you before the plague. And sometimes on quiet evenings, when the work is done and the village becomes calm, you almost forget how the world used to be. Almost. But then something happens to remind you. A letter arrives from a cousin in Venice, or a merchant passes through with stories from France, where you catch sight of one of those strange new doctors walking through the countryside wearing their peculiar bird-like masks. And you know that the real changes, are still spreading out like ripples in a pond. The Venetians were clever and figured out something that nobody else had. They realized that the plague was not just God's anger or the result of bad air or a punishment for sin. It was something specific, something that spread from person to person and from place to place in ways you could predict and maybe control. So, they did something really different. They built hospitals, but not to treat people. There wasn't much that could be done to treat someone with the plague, but it could be used to stop sick people from coming into contact with healthy people. The islands in their lagoon are used only for people to go and be left alone and for people to be kept away from other people. You must stay in quarantine for 40 days. That's how long they thought it took to decide whether someone was going to live or die. The idea spread slowly at first, then faster as people realized it actually worked. Florence built lazarettos. Milan built quarantine houses. Cities all over Europe started trying to fight diseases instead of just dealing with them. It was revolutionary in its own quiet way because it meant people weren't just helpless victims anymore. They could take action, make choices, protect themselves and their families through knowledge and planning instead of prayer and hope. This changes how you think about everything. Your youngest daughter, born 5 years after the rebellion, has grown up in a world where diseases have caused problems, where doctors wear special clothes and carry medicines that sometimes actually work, and where the arrival of plague in a neighboring city means quarantine and precautions. It's not just about accepting what God wants. She expects the world to make sense. Anticipate problems and have solutions ready. Anticipate authority figures justifying their decisions rather than demanding obedience. That's not how children thought before the plague, before the rebellion, before everything changed. Margaret's grandson is currently learning to be a painter. He's not just any painter. He's one of those new artists who have been appearing in Italian cities. Unlike artists in the past, these artists paint what they actually see. They don't paint what religious authorities tell them to see. It all started with the plague. All this new thinking when you've watched half your neighbors die for no reason that anyone can explain. When you've seen the most religious people suffering alongside the worst sinners. When you've buried children who never hurt anyone. It makes you question what you thought you knew about God, justice, and the world. People like painters, writers, and scholars are asking different questions now. Instead of asking what the church says about this, they're asking what we actually see. What can we prove? What makes sense? It's dangerous and revolutionary thinking, and it's spreading. You see it in small ways every day. The village priest still gives sermons about obedience and accepting what you have, but fewer people nod along. More people ask awkward questions about why God would let good people suffer while corrupt officials do well. The manor house still has the most power, but Lord Edmund spends more time talking to his workers than bossing them around. He learned the hard way that people who don't want to work for you can usually find someone else who will treat them better. The royal tax collectors still come around, but they're now more polite. They don't come across as aggressive, because everyone remembers what happened the last time they were too aggressive about collecting money from people who couldn't afford to pay. Power, real power, has changed in ways that are hard to see, but impossible to ignore. From the top to the bottom, from the owners to the workers, and from tradition to innovation, you can see the birth of something completely new. A world where ordinary people matter, where people are worth more than the things they can do for rich landowners, and where someone born poor might live a comfortable life. Not everyone, of course, not yet. It probably won't happen, but there are enough people for it to feel possible. People might get hooked on it once they try it. Your son wants to be a lawyer. Can you imagine a peasant's son arguing cases in court, interpreting law, maybe even writing new laws before the plague, before the rebellion, before everything changed? That would have been impossible. But stranger things have happened. Universities are different too. They are still exclusive and expensive, but they are not as strict about who can attend. Students who receive scholarships and come from families that make their money through business. These students are intelligent young men whose fathers work with their hands instead of inheriting money. People are starting to share their knowledge more easily. Books are still rare and precious, but there are more of them now than there used to be. Copying manuscripts is faster and more efficient now. The topics are more general and less focused on religious beliefs. They're more interested in practical things like medicine, engineering, astronomy, and agriculture. They also focus on how to solve problems instead of just explaining why they exist. You have learned to read a little yourself. You can read contracts and legal documents, and you can tell when someone is trying to trick you by using complicated language. Knowledge is power, and a little bit of power can change everything. The roads are better now. It wasn't because the king said so, but because merchants and travelers asked for it. People who can afford to travel want safe, reliable routes. Local communities realized they could tax road usage and use the money to fund improvements themselves. When people put their own interests first and organize them in the right way, they can make a big difference for the better. Who knew? The markets are also more lively. There will be more goods, more choice, and more competition between sellers. This means better prices for buyers, better wages for workers, and better opportunities for anyone who can spot them. Margaret is doing very well. Her trading business now spans 3 countries, dealing in everything from grain to metalwork to exotic spices from faraway places. She employs 12 people, pays them fair wages, and still makes a good profit. The secret, she tells you over wine that's much better than the ale you used to share, is treating workers like partners instead of property. Happy people work harder. Happy customers come back. If you're honest with people, they'll think well of you, and that'll make you rich. It's a new way of thinking, but it works. The village has grown. It's not back to its pre-plague size. That'll probably never happen. But new families have moved in. Young people looking for opportunities. People who are good at a certain job are attracted to the area because it is cheap to live and there are low taxes. This means that new people come to live here and they have new ideas and ways of doing things. The church is different too. Father Michael still preaches on Sundays, but his sermons focus more on compassion and helping the community, less on obeying God and being sent to hell. He's learned that people who've survived catastrophe want practical help, not threats about theoretical punishment. Also, the congregation needs him more than he needs their approval. Empty churches don't collect tithes. Even God's representatives have to change to fit in with new situations. But the most amazing change of all is how people think about the future. 30 years ago, nobody would have imagined this. Before the plague, the future was set in stone. You were born into a social class and you died in the same social class. Your children have the same social position as you, but they also have debts. Progress was measured in generations, if it happened at all. Now, people make plans, set goals, and imagine their children living better lives than they did. They believe that hard work and clever thinking can change outcomes. Hope is contagious. Your eldest daughter is married to a blacksmith's son. He is saving money to open his own shop. Your middle son works in a shop that sells wool. He is learning the business and plans to start his own trading company one day. Your youngest wants to study medicine to become one of those new doctors who actually heal people instead of just blessing them. 3 children, 3 different paths, but all of them going up. That's not luck. That's not an accident. This is because we live in a world where it is still possible to move up in society, even if it is still difficult. The Black Death created that world, not intentionally, not kindly, but definitively by killing so many people. It broke the strict social rules that had kept everyone stuck in their places for hundreds of years. This meant that there were fewer people to do the jobs, and so the workers had more power to negotiate. By showing that old ideas about authority couldn't protect anyone from disaster, it made room for new ways of thinking. The price was really high. 25 million people died in Europe. Many families were torn apart. Whole communities were destroyed, and a generation of people were so traumatized by the huge number of deaths that they cannot even begin to understand what happened. But something good came out of that. A society where people are judged by their own achievements rather than the family they are born into, where new ideas are respected as much as old traditions, and where people can challenge authority without being killed. In short, the basis of the modern world. But that wasn't the plan. History rarely goes as planned. It usually moves forward through a mix of bad luck and good fortune, hard times and new opportunities, luck and people's strong desire to survive. The plague was the worst thing that could have happened. The rebellion was the crisis. What you're living through now is called adaptation. It's really impressive. You're sitting by your fireplace on a winter evening in 1398, watching your youngest daughter practice writing by candlelight. Her letters are neat and careful, much better than your messy handwriting. She's writing a letter to her cousin in London. In the letter, she talks about life in the village. She also shares news, gossip, and plans for the future. It's just a normal letter between two ordinary people. But 30 years ago, normal people couldn't write letters because they couldn't write. They couldn't write because they had no one to write to. Their lives were too boring and restricted to have anything to write about. Now, your daughter has a full life ahead of her. If she's clever enough, she should go to school. She might get married if she finds the right person. If she's ambitious enough, she'll be in business. If she's adventurous, travel with her. Freedom is not just an idea, it is something real. That's the strangest thing that the plague left behind. But not the millions of deaths which are remembered. It's not the economic disruption, though that's still being felt. But the simple fact is that people now expect their lives to matter, expect their voices to be heard, expect their work to be valued, expect their children to have opportunities. Once people have expectations, it's hard to change them. Look outside your window. The village is sleeping peacefully under a blanket of snow. Smoke goes up from chimneys. Dogs bark in the distance. Someone's playing a lot, but not very well. Normal sounds, comfortable sounds. The sounds of people living their lives without worrying about sudden disasters or unfair punishments. It took 30 years, but somehow normal came back different from how it was before. It's better in many ways, but it's also very much like normal. The plague taught Europe that catastrophes were always possible. The rebellion taught it that change was always possible too. And what we learned from these lessons was that a new kind of society should be built. This society would be based on the revolutionary idea that normal people should be happy. It's not too much to ask. The basic things that everyone should have are food on the table, a roof over their heads, fair pay for their work, and children who might live better lives than their parents. But for most of human history, even that was too much to hope for. Now, it's the bare minimum people expect. That's really impressive. You put the fire out and get ready for bed. You check that the doors are locked and that the windows are closed to keep out the cold. These are small steps to keep you safe from the problems you can expect. It's the kind of everyday care that you can give when you're not always looking out for diseases, food shortages, or civil unrest. When the world makes enough sense that planning ahead actually works, you'll be warm and cozy in bed. The blankets are wool, well-made, and bought rather than given as a gift. Your house is solid, properly constructed, and chosen rather than assigned. These aren't luxuries exactly, but they're comforts. They show that you have some control over your life. As you drift off to sleep, you think about the market in the next village. You'll sell grain, buy supplies, and maybe stop by the inn for ale and a chat with other farmers. Ordinary plans, normal expectations. The kind of boring day-to-day life that's only possible when society isn't falling apart. The Black Death ended 50 years ago. The rebellion failed 30 years ago. But somehow, the world they left behind became the world you always hoped for. It's not perfect, it's not equal, and it's not fair in any absolute sense, but it's better. It is objectively better. And that is you drift off to sleep in your own house, in your own bed, in a life you have built up through your own decisions and efforts. That's enough. More than enough. It's everything. Whatever the future brings, it belongs to people like you now. People who work for a living. People who think for themselves. People who want tomorrow to be just as good as today and are ready to work to make it happen. That's the Black Death's most unexpected gift. It wasn't the ending, but the beginning that it made possible. This is the start of a new world where normal people are important, where you matter. Your story is part of a bigger story, which is made meaningful by all the choices that people make. It's easy to sleep in such a world. You can relax and enjoy your dreams. Tomorrow will be better. It's not perfect, but it's better. That's a big enough change for anyone.